The top 1% of taxpayers in Alabama benefit to the tune of $12,900 per year. And so obviously it's clear who this is benefiting.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Let's go to the state of Alabama. And joining us is Jacob Morrison. Jacob is president of the North Alabama Area Labor Council. He's also a proud member of American Federation of Government Employees Local 1858, which is located in Huntsville, Alabama. No stranger to America's workforce. Jacob, Happy New Year to you. Thanks for joining us. I know you want to talk about the upcoming legislative session there, but I saw this was on one of your blogs, as a matter of fact, when you do the political and legislative update, that last year the legislature eliminated the state income tax on overtime wages. And apparently it sounded good. Hey, yeah, you don't have to pay taxes on overtime wages, but apparently it hurt the state coffers, and they may reinstate this tax. What's going on there? Maybe you could sort this out for me, brother. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, it's great to be back, Flash. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, so there is when the House Minority Leader put forward this piece of legislation to cut taxes on overtime wages in Alabama, and like you said, it seems like a good thing. I'll say that we were not as just excited about it as some other folks are. I think that. Just generally speaking, I am not of the mind to incentivize working overtime. I think that, we want to disincentivize people working more than 40 hours in a week. We don't think it's good. We think there's a reason that the labor movement tried so hard to get the 40-hour work week passed. But, we always said, like, if we were in the legislature, we would have voted for it because, so many people get tax cuts in Alabama. Why shouldn't working people? So that's fine. And it's been in place now for almost a year, and people have liked it. A lot of, particularly, in the building trades and some machinists union members and stuff like that. And so, I think the labor movement really wants to keep this tax cut. Well, the original estimate for how much this was going to cost was apparently something like $30 to $40 million a year. Although, there was a big question mark there, like, we're not certain about this. Well, we have an estimate now about how much this is costing from the state Senate budget chair, which is $240 million in the first 9 months. So obviously that is a lot more than $40 million.
Yeah.
And so the state budget chair is now kind of, making the rounds on talk radio and stuff and saying, hey, we might have to repeal this thing. We might have to not renew it. And so we'll see what happens with that. The person whose bill it was, the House Minority Leader, Democrat from Huntsville, he thinks that the $240 million estimate is wrong. And he's actually contending that somehow this overtime tax cut, because of the economic, generation and everything, is actually increase the amount of money going into the Education Trust Fund. I find that frankly hard to believe, but I think the state Senate budget chair has kind of walked back a little bit as far as the $240 million. He's like, maybe that's not exactly right. I need to look a little deeper into the numbers. And so there's a lot of confusion about what's going on exactly, which is kind of crazy because it's been the law for a year. You would think we would know how much this costs, but there's confusion about it. So
amazing.
So that's where we are there. And like I said, the unions, we oppose the revocation of this because this has been good for our members. And so we're saying, look, if it is the case that this costs $240 million a year, then that we obviously need to fill that budget hole. And so we can look to other places to fill this hole, right? So in the same legislative session, they passed, quote unquote, a school choice bill, right? And
Right.
you know how bad those have been across the country. In the first year, it's estimated to cost $100 million. And in subsequent years, they are completely removing the income eligibility cap. So in 2026 or 2027, the state of Alabama is going to say no matter how rich you are, you could be making $1 million a year. The state of Alabama will personally write you a $7,000 check per child to go to a private school of your choice from the Education Trust Fund. And so that could turn into as big a problem as $3 or $4, $500 million per year from the Education Trust Fund. And so we say, repeal that, repeal the quote unquote Choose Act, or at least make the income eligibility cap permanent. That's one easy way to kind of make sure that doesn't spiral out of control. Another thing that we do in Alabama that most states don't do, or one of only 2 states that do this, is we allow people to deduct some portion of their federal income tax from their state income taxes. The lowest income Alabamians benefit to the tune of like $3 a year from this income tax deduction. And even higher income Alabamians only benefit to the tune of like $550 a year. But the top 1% of taxpayers in Alabama benefit to the tune of $12,901 per year. And so obviously it's clear who this is benefiting. And so we should, so our council has said, let's repeal the federal income tax deduction. And that would generate approximately $800 million a year. And so that would more than cover this deficit from the overtime tax cut, and the burden would largely fall on wealthy people. And so we spoke at the Madison County Legislative Forum Monday night about all of this, and let our delegation know that's what our unions support. And we also just threw out the idea that you could always just raise taxes on the rich. I mean, we have basically a flat income tax in the state of Alabama of 5%. You could always just tack on another marginal bracket at income over $400,000 a year or $200,000 a year and say income over $200,000, you got to pay 10%.
Right.
Right. I know that sounds crazy, but you could always just do something like that. Very, very simple. I know that people don't want to hear things like that, but so that's kind of where we are with this overtime tax cut thing.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
It's funny, too, because more and more CEOs, Warren Buffett started this years ago, and he said his secretary, when it comes to taxes, she actually pays more percentage-wise than he does. And it's just not right. And I just saw Jamie Dimon, who is the head of one of the big banks in the country. He said, you know what? He's right. We have to do a better job when it comes to this kind of thing.
Right.
I will say this, Jacob. I've been doing, podcasting and broadcasting for over a half a century. And was one thing I have learned when it comes to numbers, especially tax dollars and politicians, don't trust them. Don't trust them. I tell you, they keep moving those numbers all the time, and you never get a straight answer from them. I love that. They said 40 million, and all of a sudden it's 240 million. No, that 240 million is wrong. Oh, we're off by 200 million. Big deal. Come on now. So let's talk about the upcoming legislative session, which starts in February. And I mentioned this at the top of the show. Maybe you can unwind some of this for me. The anti-voluntary recognition bill. Now, last year they passed it, but there's an opportunity to turn this around a little bit. Why don't you explain what's going on, or hopefully what will happen here in the next session? Go ahead.
Yeah, so like you said, the anti-voluntary recognition bill did pass in the state of Alabama. So it is currently illegal for an employer to voluntarily recognize their workers' union in the state of Alabama if they are going to get tax incentives from the state. So if you are a company that currently gets tax incentives and then you go and voluntarily organize your union, you're going to get those tax incentives revoked. And so obviously that's an attack on organized labor. But we have been working, we've been in talks with, other partners like Jobs of America and some of our allies in the legislature about how can we use this kind of mechanism to benefit working people in the state of Alabama, right? Like if we're going to, we've always been saying, folks like us, you and I, Flash, that, if we're going to have public dollars going to employers, then they should have strings attached, right?
Right.
And so in Alabama, they just finally kind of came out with, well, yeah, of course you can attach strings to public dollars. And here's the first string: you can't have a union, basically. And so we say, okay, well, let's see if we can't use this mechanism for good. And so we have a couple of legislators who are going to be introducing some pieces of legislation. The one that we are most optimistic about is one around child labor. I think you'll remember a couple of years ago, there was a lot of news around child labor in the state of Alabama at Hyundai manufacturing suppliers and things like that. 12-year-old children working in manufacturing environments, right? And we know this is obviously a problem in poultry plants across the country as well. And so Senator Marika Coleman is going to be introducing a bill that says, look, if you violate our child labor laws, then we're going to revoke our tax incentives from you. And I think that is incredibly common sense. I think no public funds for child labor exploiters is a very easy slogan to throw around, and it shouldn't be hard for people to sign on to. And supposedly, that they've heard good things from people in the Republican majority. And so we may actually be able to win this bill. I think some of the other stuff is more ambitious, but I do think that we could see some real punishment for people who exploit child labor in the state of Alabama. So I'm excited about that. There are some other ones that tie incentives to pro-family policies in the workplace, like no mandatory overtime or mandatory paid parental leave, and mandatory retirement plans and things like that. I think those are going to be a little bit more ambitious. I still think it's very common sense. Again, if I'm going to be having my public funds from the state of Alabama going to a company, I don't think we should be using public dollars on companies that don't have paid parental leave. I don't think that we should be giving public dollars to companies that don't have retirement plans for their employees. I think that's very common sense. But well, I do recognize that that's a little bit more ambitious, but we're going to try. We're going to try for it. We have people lined up. I think State Representative Neil Rafferty is going to be introducing those. And then the temporary staffing agencies are, a big problem. They're the ones that are supposedly, more responsible for this. And we've got laws on the books that say that these temporary staffing agencies have to register with the Department of Commerce, but the Department of Commerce is not enforcing this law, that they have to register with the State Department of Commerce. And so Neil Rafferty is also going to have a piece of legislation to basically reiterate to the Department of Commerce that, yes, this is still a law and the legislature does still support this law. You have to enforce it now. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and very hopeful on the child labor stuff, and we'll see on the other stuff. We'll keep you updated.
Jacob, it's kind of ridiculous that you have to pass a law to enforce the law, but apparently that's the case in Alabama on this. Is that what I just heard?
Yes, apparently that's the case. I've had people tell me that they have gone to the Department of Commerce and pointed to the statute and said, look, this is still law. This has not been overturned. And the department has said, well, I don't know. That was a long time ago. So we're not totally sure if we should enforce it or not.
Jacob, I'm glad we're having this conversation because a couple of days ago we featured Greg Leroy from the organization Good Jobs First. And we were talking about what some cities and municipalities have done throughout the country when it comes to wage theft. And in New York, they have a wall of shame that they created. And any company that gets a public contract that's obviously guilty of wage theft, they're going to be listed on the wall of shame, and they're not going to get that contract anymore. So that's the big issue here. And if more cities and states start going down this road, yeah. And again, child labor laws, if they're violating, you know what? We're done with you. That's the way it should be. One more issue here. I understand, there was a lot of strikes in your area. We talked about this very, very intently here on the show with Amazon, Starbucks, and this was during the holidays. Apparently, they were pretty strong down in Alabama, I hear.
I mean, there were picket lines in Alabama for sure. They did shut down the Starbucks. The Scottsboro, Alabama Starbucks store is one of two in the state that have unionized, and that is in our territory with the North Alabama Council. So I, along with some others, went down and participated in the picket line with those folks. It was really cool. It's always cool going down to that Starbucks. It's I think that most of your listeners are more familiar with union meetings that are full of kind of like Gen X or boomers, kind of older folks, a lot of men. And every time I go down to Scottsboro Starbucks, it's basically all women. It's basically everybody's under like the age of 21 or 22. And so, it's kind of refreshing seeing, such young people, like such a different group of folks being so interested and invested in the union. I always get some energy going down there, and they were excited. We talked to them about how we can support them getting the union into stores in Huntsville. And so hopefully we'll be able to build on that in this year. And the Teamsters did, extend picket lines to Amazon in the state of Alabama, in our area in Huntsville. And so they were able to turn around some of the union freight companies, and they were able to hand out a bunch of flyers to some of the Amazon employees as they went into work. And sounded like they got some good contacts. So, I'm hopeful that the union will be able to start reaching out to some folks here in Alabama, and see if we can't get the folks here in our area, to join up with the Teamsters, and anything that I can do to support that, I absolutely want to do. So,
amen, brother. Jacob Morrison, we're going to leave it on that note. Jacob Morrison, president of the North Alabama Area Labor Council, member of AFGE, Local 1858, co-host of the Valley Labor Report, also working full-time. Guy's got many hats. Doing a great job here on America's Workforce. You take care. Say hi to Adam for me, and we'll talk some more in 2025. Okay, my brother?
All right, brother. Appreciate it.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.